All right, I'll try to hit the deck tech really fast on changes. I've made a lot of them. So I took out Ravages of War and I put in War of Invention. Basically, work and go get Winter Orbs. So it's kind of like having another land destruction effect. But I did not like drawing Ravages and Armageddon in the, both. So this way, I can have a Armageddon in my back pocket that I can tutor for. But meanwhile, I have Word, which I can use to fight counter wars against blue players. I can use it to tap my own Winter Orb that in a way that can't be stopped. And in general, it's just a very strong card. I actually added Vedalken Shackles back into the deck to make Whir a little bit stronger so that it's got those two really good targets. And I took out Umezawa's Jitte because I found that Sword of Feast and Famine is just insanely strong with Winter Orb and does way too many good things for this deck. It's truly the best Disrupting Scepter ever printed. But Jitte, it's good, but it's kind of redundant. It does what Breya already does, and didn't feel like it made a ton of sense in here. Although I like drawing it, I actually have Legacy's Allure instead because I would rather just be able to play a Legacy's Allure on turn two and then forget about it and play the whole game with my opponent having to figure out how to deal with that. Something else I've done is I added Vandal Blast into the deck again. Vandal Blast is much like in with other cards that we've opted to try out or that sort of thing. Vandal Blast is a card you can get rid of it if it's in your hand and you don't want it in your hand a lot of times with, for example, Jace or Brainstorm or whatever. But you can also just imprint it on Chrome Mox. However, what I found is that there are enough targets now, and secondarily, I had a really rough time. I was having a really rough time in the mirror. So I was having a really tough time against Breya. And the card I fear the most in the mirror is Vandal Blast, so I've added it to the deck to help address that. And then to support Whir and Vandal Blast, these higher mana cards, I put the Gilded Lotus, Strand Dynamo, Worn Power Stone, and Coalition Relic, Coalition Relic back into the deck. So multiple kind of Soul Ring type of effects that can take advantage of when you draw an Ancient Tomb or a City of Traders very well, and that allows you to it allows you to get the advantage where you can actually make a play and have a counter spell, which is something that I was struggling to do without these cards. Then the other thing I did was I now one thing I've done that I don't like and I cannot figure out how to undo it. I don't know how to fit Ancestral Vision back into the deck. It is currently not in the deck. I actually sent the list to Brian and he's going to try to see if we can figure out which card shouldn't be in here. What I do have that's new is Logic Knot, which I kind of like. It's basically been blue counter target spell for me the whole time. I saw Dots using it. I thought, you know what? He's probably right. It's probably a good card. Let me see if I think so. And I've been playing with it and I've been liking it. So the other thing I did was I took out Impulse and I replaced it with so basically I put in the Quiet Spec package. So the Quiet Speculation package, for if you're not familiar, is Flash of Insight, Deep Analysis, Think Twice, and Quiet Speculation. And if you have drawn one of those cards, then you can go get 3 cards, including Mystical Teachings. And and of course, there's nothing wrong with hard casting any of those cards. So that has substituted for Night's Whisper, Painful Truths, Impulse, and Ancestral Vision. So basically, Quiet Speculation is Ancestral Vision. Painful Truths is Deep Analysis. Quiet Spec, or Think Twice is Impulse, sort of. And I guess, Flash of Insight would be Impulse, and then Think Twice would be Night's Whisper. So that's kind of how that works. But because they're first of all, with them being blue, it's more Force of Will fodder for you. Secondly, they're super compact. Like if you do play turn 2 Quiet Speculation, most of the games where you do that, unless your opponent puts you under extreme amounts of pressure very fast, you're highly favored to have won that game. Just the act of playing Quiet Speculation for those 3 cards puts you so far ahead on cards, because now you can play a land and say go, draw a card with Think Twice at the end of their turn, play a land and cast deep analysis, draw 2 more cards, still leaving 2 mana up at this point, and then you get to somewhere mid to late game, you get to flashback, Flash of Insight. Of course, you can always do it for 1, and as you'll see, I think there's a game in here where I actually flash for 1, but it's really important because I Mystical Tutor for Force of Will, then I Flash of Insight for 1, exiling Mystical Tutor and put the Force of Will into my hand, casting Flash from the graveyard. So anyway, let's get to the game still, and then I will also talk about the folks that I played against who, well, I recognized who seem to be fans of the channel. No, I don't want to join the league. I would like to view the replay. Okay, there we go. All right, Bizzle here. I have faced quite a bit. This is one of the strongest players. There's a kind of panoply of very strong players, and Bizzle is one of them. In fact, but I get a great draw. He's playing Brawl, and I get a great draw. I get to go first turn Weathered Wayfarer, and that's always super brutal against Brawl. He uses Gitaxian Probe and Mystical Tutor to go get Polymorph in his hand, so I now know, of course, that he has Polymorph in his hand. You notice there he casts Think Twice naturally at the end of my turn. You can see how bad I feel about that he's going to be able to, well, think twice. Anyway, so on his turn, he goes for Brawl. So I was able to get, Weathered Wayfarer, Signet, and then fetch land. So he goes for Brawl. So in response, I fetch, activate Weathered Wayfarer with the fetch land on the stack, resolve the fetch land, and then Mystical Tutor. And I Mystical Tutor for a Daze, actually. He's got exactly 1 mana untapped. So let's go Breya here. So the thing is, if he wants to polymorph here, he'll have 1 mana. I cannot Daze that, but he'll only be left with 1 mana. At which point, on my turn, I can potentially just cast the Ready or Jace and deal with the Emrakul that way. All right, so this turn, I'm going to go ahead and Breya his commander off the board. Of course, with Weathered Wayfarer, it was uncounterable. My Breya was. So I go ahead and play Polluted Delta and pass, so this way I can do the fetch trick again. Opponent's got 5 mana up. And at the end of his turn, Delta and Wayfarer. And I think he may have had a play in response, and I guess not. So I go get Wasteland. And a land that comes into play tapped. I go ahead and drew a Treachery for the turn, waste his Mishra's Factory. He uses it to cast Think Twice from the graveyard. And I'm going to go ahead and attack for some damage. And he's down to only 2 mana, so this seems like a really good time. Like, if he's got a counterspell, 2 mana is not going to work due to the daze. So he does, in fact, have a delay, but Jace, I daze it, and Jace gets down and active. So we now have active Breya, active Jace, and a Weathered Wayfarer running. All right, so at the end of my opponent's, he plays Mutavault for his turn. At the end of his turn, I activate Weathered Wayfarer. He draws 3 cards in response. Totally fine by me. My hand is completely awesome. And this, of course, works very well with Jace. Yeah. All right, so he doesn't... he clearly doesn't have a Force of Will. I don't remember what I went and fetched here, but I think he may have just scooped with the Weathered Wayfarer on the stack. I think what I went and got, I would go get here is Ancient Tomb, play Ancient Tomb, tap for 5 and cast. Well, I would draw Ancient Tomb, and then on my turn I would Jace, and then probably play Ancient Tomb, cast Tezzeret, cast Winter Orb, and mash for damage. Is probably how this turn would have played out. And so anyway, Bizzle, who always is a challenge, did not beat me that time. So Little Beep, I believe, is a viewer of the channel and has mentioned that. And this is kind of cool because he mentioned that he noticed that the deck had some changes to it, which is pretty spiffy, actually, that my opponents, picked up on that. And he's absolutely right, of course. So he's playing Silas and Timna. I lead off with Basic Island and go with turn 2 Legacies of Lore, which sticks, thankfully. So that's a big deal there. He plays Relic Seeker, which means he's going to be able to get Renowned and grow outside of the scope of Legacy's Allure. But I check to make sure the equipment doesn't go to hand or to play. It just goes to hand. And when it does, I go ahead and quiet speculation myself for the standard package. And then I use this opportunity to Dimer Aqueduct a land back to my hand, pass the turn. So he's got a window here, and he uses it to play Thalia, who's going to make my non-basic lands come into play tapped, the 3-mana Thalia. That's a pain. On my turn, I just go ahead and flashback Deep Analysis, finding a Vedalken Shackles and a land, and pass for the turn. He goes for a Phyrexian Revoker. This could be really bad. I mana leak it, and it fortunately gets leaked. So he gets to play his Umezawa's Jite, which he fetched with his Relic Seeker, but that's it. On my turn, I'm able to steal Thalia with Legacy's Allure, which means that my lands don't come into play tapped, which means I can now play Vedalken Shackles and steal his other creature. He plays a Mausoleum Wanderer, comes into play tapped, and of course a land that comes into play tapped, and another creature that comes into play tapped. And for my turn, I run out Breya, leaving 2 mana up so that I don't lose to Treachery, and smash him for 6 with his own guys. So I got to watch that Mausoleum Wanderer. On his turn, he hits me with a Duress, taking out a Vampiric Tutor, but I'm holding Imperial Seal. I go ahead and sack some artifacts to kill his Mausoleum Wanderer, and at the end of his turn, I Flash of Insight. It's a little bit awkward of a sentence. On my turn, I go for Imperial Seal, and he mental missteps it, so I remand it back to my hand, binding Swords to Plowshares, which is fantastic. Cast a Izzet Signet off of Wasteland, mash for 4+3/+3. I let him. I don't Swords his guy though. I just go ahead and Imperial Seal after combat, and then play Dimer's Signet, thinking I'll Swords his next play. I just let him get some counters on Jite. He, however, hymns the sword out of my hand, but the card I fetched was Dak Faden, so I then steal his Umezawa's Jite after untapping Vedalken Shackles. So I now have control of his Umezawa's Jite. I cast Breya and pass for the turn, and at this point my opponent is empty-handed. I'm empty-handed, but I mean, he can play his other commander and pretty much just pass here. Swinging in doesn't seem particularly good, and he would be putting counters on my Umezawa's Jite if he attacked with anything equipped. Otherwise, there's no way for him to get through at all. And then next turn, of course, I'm going to steal one creature, move Umezawa's Jite, and you know, it's not looking good for him. Suffice to say, he agrees and scoops it up. And of course, I still have Think Twice, so I actually am going to draw a card for the turn and then draw another card while doing all the other spiffy stuff. So, round 3, I play against the Sensei. And he is playing Vial Smasher. Vial Smasher Crom, and seemed like a cool dude. Had a nice chat about the format. I have a pretty amazing start. So I get first turn Izzet Signet, even though I'm going second. I'm doing great on mana. So I use Dimer Aqueduct. I was trying to think, I could have actually played turn 2 Breya here, but I was worried about Pyroblast, so I just decided to play it safe, and he Wastelands me. So, wah, wah, wah. Maybe I shouldn't have played it safe, but I would have lost my City of Traders if I went for turn 2. So I Wasteland him during upkeep in case he's got a Stifle. He misses a land drop, so I play Basic Island to ensure that I can remand here. He does find a land drop, but that's it. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and play another land and Mox Diamond and pass. He Vampiric Tutors. I'm pretty sure at this point he's going to get land, and I had a strong suspicion it was going to be Dimer Aqueduct because I've already burned my Wasteland, and he needs land drops, and that gets him 2. I go ahead and Vampiric at the end of his turn. He mental missteps. I remand. Is this a familiar story or what? But he has a spell Snare, unlike the other guy. So, on my turn, I just cast Breya with City of Traders up. And for my opponent's turn, he plays Damnation. So I go ahead and gain a 5 life, because 5 life against Vial Smasher is more important than 3 damage. And that's what I wanted, though. I played City of Traders last turn so that I would ensure that I had enough mana this turn to play War for 3. which I do. That's why I didn't lead off with other lands, and that lets me play Crucible and wasteland his Dimir Aqueduct. And with my opponent in a horrible position, he scoops it up. He could have, of course, drawn if he had Dak Faden in his hand. He could have drawn, played a land. He would have had to draw a land, of course, but then cast Dak Faden. And I was certainly nervous about that possibility, but it was much better to pull the trigger now and just try to win, clearly, than to worry too much about that risk. And if he had made that play and stole my Crucible, oh, it would have been pretty bad, because I would have been 2 turns back before I played Breya. Like, that would have been the nightmare scenario. But fortunately, it's all good. He didn't have land Dak Faden, and we move on to round 4 against Jammin' V. And I have a monster hand. This guy's playing Zurgo. I've actually played him a couple times today. He hasn't beat me yet. So I think that's a good sign for Breya, that seems well positioned to deal with mono red. So I get first turn fetch land, Mox Diamond. As soon as he plays land, I get to do the Tithe trick. So now I will hit. I made a mistake though. Hallowed Fountain should not be Hallowed Fountain. I should not have fetched that here. I should have fetched Plateau, in case he kills my Mox Diamond. Then I don't have red. So that was a mistake. I play Doretti on my turn and just chump block Zurgo, and then he plays Carry, Zev, some kind of legendary thing. So I go ahead and just play Breya, and then take a counter off of Doretti to kill a Thopter and his creature, which puts Doretti into Searing Spear range, or burn range, which I expected. But if my opponent's burning it like he did, then then he's not killing Breya, and that's where I want to be. So now I can actually ignore Zurgo. He gets a Skull Clamp. I can ignore Zurgo and just start mashing for 5. He goes for Umezawa's Jitte, and I forbid with buyback, throwing away the Hallowed Fountain and Tundra I fetched earlier, having picked up the Tundra off in Azorius Chancery and played land tax. I will now tax up 3 cards to fuel the forbid. So we'll get 3 pretty islands, one of which I can play. I am always careful about playing too many non-basics against mono red because of Price of Progress, but basics I am happy to slam onto the table. I do have a Treachery, but I don't deem Zurgo to be threatening enough to Treachery, even with a Skull Clamp. But I do only attack with Breya this time and not the Thopter. He then plays Harsh Mentor, who I just let slide. On my turn, I Treachery the Harsh Mentor, effectively costing me no mana. I've drawn a Snapcaster, so my hand is Fact or Fiction, Forbid, Snapcaster. And I go ahead and send in Breya again. His board is 3 cards in hand, 4 lands, a Skull Clamp on a Zurgo Bellstriker. So end of his turn, I go ahead and Factor Fiction. He gives me choice of pickup land, or double land Toxic Deluge. I take pickup land. If I'm passing the Toxic Deluge up, then this game is clearly going my way. I go ahead and play a land this turn, untapped, not the pickup land, specifically because I have a potential play here that I'd like to make, and as it turns out, I may need to make. He plays a Hasted Scab Clan, so I'm going to play Snapcaster into Factor Fiction, and at this point, I've got Harsh Mentor, Snapcaster. Harsh Mentor actually did 2 to my opponent because he moved his Skull Clamp. I've got Forbid, Is It Boiler Works, Armageddon. I'm about to Factor Fiction again, and my opponent just scoops. If he hadn't, then I was going to trade off Snapcaster for Scab Clan. And the Factor Fiction was almost certainly going to reveal, craziness. And then from there, I take the hit from Zurgo. He gets to draw a couple of cards, that's great. But then I attack back for 4, 5, 6, 7 points of damage, taking him to 3, and then activate Breya and finish him off. So he just scoops before we, before I had to go through the motions. All right. And lastly, this game against Chubby Rain. Now, Chubby Rain's someone who also watches the channel. And he kicked my tail in a previous game, Breya on Breya, because he's loaded his deck up with artifact mana, and I just didn't have enough. And I didn't have enough artifact mana. I didn't have enough solutions, and he just ran me over. So that is part of. He actually inspired some of these changes, which I feel a lot happier with, and I'm glad that he did. I was previously struggling with Breya decks one specific Breya deck I kept facing, one person playing it, and I thought, well, maybe it's his specific build. But after getting my teeth kicked in by Chubby Rain, I realized that I had just nerfed my deck too hard to deal with the mirror match, and I don't like that, so I fixed it, I believe. All right, so I have a land tax start, extremely risky if my opponent has a fast artifact mana start. Then I think there is a lot to be said for this being a game loss. But instead, I get first turn land tax, top deck, and Is It Boiler Works, and I look like a pro. This is all perfectly planned out, of course. Anyway, if only. So I go ahead and fetch at least one island. Am I going to get two? I think I am. So I get two islands, draw a talisman, which is amazing again, and I'm able to just play Command Tower Talisman Pass, sitting on a counterspell. Opponent goes for a Metal Worker, which I could steal with Vedalken Shackles, but I counter it so that if he has a Force of Will or some way to fight over the counterspell, then I can steal it with Shackles as a backup plan. I don't want that to be my primary plan because I have the potential to do exactly what I just did. Tax up my last land, play Tezzeret, and orb him. Doesn't look like he's got good mana over there, and I'm holding Thran Dynamo Shackles. So if I untap Boilerworks Talisman, let's say he, I don't know, plays land Talisman or something, I get to play a land, tap 4 for Thran Dynamo. If my opponent were to, let's say, play land Dark Confidant, then I could go play an island, cast Thran Dynamo, tap the Dynamo for 3, use Tezzeret to untap both the Dynamo and the Talisman, then tap the Dynamo for 3 more, cast Vedalken Shackles, and steal his Dark Confidant in that circumstance. Or I could tap the Dynamo and the Talisman for a total of 4, cast Vedalken Shackles with 1 floating, Tezzeret for 0, go get Mox Opal and steal his guy, assuming he had that play, which I would actually like better. So if he had no play, I would go for the same style of turn, and hopefully, oh, I guess I wouldn't have been able to get Mox Opal. Never mind. Anyway, but I would have gone for the same kind of big mana turn, and then if my opponent, tapped out, then I just fetch up and Mox Opal. If the Thran Dynamo sticks, then I'm not even sure what I would do there. I probably would fetch. Geez, I don't even know. Well, it doesn't matter. He scooped it up. I know these were quick games, but there you go. I'm gotta prevent myself from just gabbing incessantly, which I don't think you come to the channel to hear. But yeah, those are the changes. I do look forward to input and any ideas on where Ancestral Vision might fit into this puzzle piece here, because I think that not playing Ancestral, first of all, in this format seems like a bad idea because it's just generally good in the format as it is, and secondly, in a deck running As Foretold is a mistake. So I feel like As Foretold or Ancestral Vision needs to get in here, but I just don't know where. So comments will be appreciated. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.